Hello, everyone! Welcome to 2026, as well as another episode of Real American History. Once again, I'm your host, Tess Evans, public historian. In this episode, I will be talking a little bit about religious tolerance and freedom in early America. So within the 13 original colonies, there was quite a bit of religious diversity, but also conflict over religious dominance. And the religions and denominations that we had at the time were the Anglicans, who represented the Church of England, Congregationalists, or the Puritans, Presbyterians, Baptists, Quakers, Lutherans, Methodists, Catholics, Jews, and smaller groups like the Mennonites. The indigenous peoples here in America had their own religious and spiritual beliefs as well, as did the enslaved populations. In fact, there's evidence that Islam was being practiced among enslaved Africans who were sent to South Carolina, as that is the religion that a lot of them practiced up in areas in Africa. But in the period before the American Revolution, there were arguments over whether there should be one main religion or denomination established in America that governments would help fund, or if each colony should just enact their own religious laws. And a lot of them did. Several colonies established dominant religions and even persecuted those who didn't adopt those religions. Massachusetts was dominated by Puritans, for example, and they persecuted any Quakers who were there. And that's why many Quakers fled to other colonies like Rhode Island, who were a little bit more tolerant of religious differences. And Quaker William Penn, you may have heard of, he established Pennsylvania, refused to make Quakerism the official church of that colony and allowed all kinds of Christians and Jews to settle there. On the other hand, for example, in Virginia, they outlawed Quakers and prevented Catholics from holding any type of public office. And so, Maryland became a land where those Christian groups in Virginia could go to escape religious persecution. And Maryland established a document called the Maryland Toleration Act in 1649, which states that, quote, "No person or persons whatsoever within this province, professing to believe in Jesus Christ, shall, from henceforth, be in any ways troubled, molested, or discountenanced for or in respect of his or her religion, nor in the free exercise thereof." So, no persecution for your religious differences. End quote. The same document, also states that if someone cursed God or denied Jesus Christ to be the Son of God, they could be punished by death. Now, Rhode Island had something very similar. They had an official charter that said, quote, "No person within the said colony at any time hereafter shall be anywise molested, punished, disquieted, or called in question for any differences in opinion in matters of religion, and do not actually disturb the civil peace of our said colony, but that all and every person and persons may, from time to time, and at all times hereafter, freely and fully have and enjoy his and their own judgments and consciences in matter of religious concernments." End quote. Again, religious tolerance within the colony. New York was settled by people of different backgrounds and religions, which is one reason why the colony itself was so tolerant and accommodating to various religions. In fact, in 1777, the New York City skyline showed 18 churches for 18 different denominations. Now, going back a few years here, during the 1730s and 40s, there was a movement called the Great Awakening, which is basically when an evangelical or a more energetic, diverse, and independent style of preaching took hold, and that was led by an Anglican minister named George Whitefield. And the Great Awakening also led to greater participation of women in a new Baptist movement that took place, and led to the first significant attempts to convert enslaved Africans to Christianity. Southern states during the Great Awakening, and especially after the American Revolution, separated themselves completely from the Church of England, And arguments then began for the separation of church and state. Some of the founding fathers, like Thomas Jefferson, believed that the state should assure religious liberty for all its citizens, and he did not support any state-sponsored or supported religious establishments. John Adams believed that political and religious liberty were intertwined and inseparable. And he said that history has shown us that good rulers preserved the sacred trust of political and religious freedom, and evil rulers used political power and religious rationalizations to destroy a people's freedom. Now, many evangelicals, for instance, Baptists, were convinced that combining religion into the state led to corruption. And so evangelicals, some liberal Christians, and deists, or those who follow deism, like Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, which is basically the belief that God created the universe but doesn't intervene in our daily lives, all advocated for the separation of church and state. Pastor Roger Williams, who founded Providence, Rhode Island, believed any influence from the state would corrupt the church, and that God instituted civil governments to protect people's lives and freedom, but not to police the affairs of the soul. But Puritans completely disagreed. They believed that religion was so important that it demanded state support. Now, all of these arguments culminated in the establishment of the First Amendment. Within the First Amendment is the Establishment Clause, and that states that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. So basically, the federal government couldn't create an official national religion. And of course, Supreme Court cases and arguments about what acts fall under separation of church and state have been debated for years, as I'm sure they will continue to be. So that is it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about religious tolerance and freedom in early America. As always, I will have some notes, some primary, secondary sources, and a couple of videos for y'all to watch as well if you're interested in learning more about this topic. So I will hopefully see you back again. I should be putting out another episode later in this month. So until then, hope you all take care. Thanks.